Hi, everyone. You can see behind me my virtual background of the old city of Jerusalem, home to the great monotheistic faiths, a place of such strife over the centuries, but also of such hope. Now, this week I've been studying the Psalms, and you'll see in my posting on the Substack a list of Psalms and ones that particularly move me because they help me to deal with various moods that I often encounter over the course of a given day or week. And they're helpful. I hope that I can, help these Psalms to be helpful to you. But one in particular I want to talk about in this video, and that is Psalm 51, which came to mind this week during the horrific, gut-wrenching testimony, if you can call it that, of Pam Bondi in Washington, where she couldn't even turn around and face the survivors, the victims, those who have suffered most at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein and his abettors, of which she is now one. She could not take accountability. She could not take responsibility. Doesn't matter that she herself may not have committed the worst of the sins by covering them up when she has the power to heal and make changes. That is in itself a horrific sin. Psalm 51 really speaks to that. So I want to talk about that in my brief talk here, and then release you to the rest of the Substack. I hope you'll have a chance to study it over the holiday weekend and really enjoy what the Psalms can provide. Anyway, when you're in Jerusalem, as I virtually am right now, but when you stand in the city of David and you look across the valley, you can see the flat rooftops of Silwan on the other side. And it was on one of those rooftops where King David first saw Bathsheba, bathing. He immediately knew that he had to have her, and he did. You know the story. But she was married, and her husband Uriah was off fighting one of David's wars. When she discovered she was pregnant, they didn't need a DNA test to know who the father was. David solved his problem by having Uriah move to the front lines and ordering the other troops to back off. Uriah was killed. David married Bathsheba, and they lived happily ever after. Not exactly. The prophet Nathan condemned the monarch, and David saw the error of his ways. The baby that was born died, and never again did the house of David know peace. David pleaded for forgiveness, but knew mostly misery for the rest of his days. So that's where Psalm 51 comes into play. Psalm 51 chronicles David's true remorse, and some of that psalm was plunked right into the middle of the High Holidays liturgy. This poetic masterpiece reveals the depth of the tortured king's self-recognition and despair, and it is breathtaking. I've linked to it on the Substack page. The purity of his penitence, without even the hint of rationalization. None of this, I'm sorry if you were offended stuff, or I'm sorry if you can't take a joke, Uriah. Read this psalm. It is so refreshing. David pleads, Al tashlichenu milfanecha v'ruach kadshecha al tikach mimenu. Do not cast me out of your presence or take your Holy Spirit away from me. And this, don't hide your face from me. Hide your face from my transgression. Don't cancel me. Blot out my iniquities. Haster panecha michatat ai, v'chol avonotai meche. It's interesting. The word meche which David uses here, means to erase, to cancel. Yes, we invented cancel culture. But in Jewish tradition, it's not the sinner who is canceled, but rather the sin. And that happens when there is remorse. And that happens when the offender takes responsibility. And that happens when the leader is accountable for their actions. And when that happens, there is a second chance. At the Golden Calf, the charges against Israel maybe would have included one count of idolatry in the second degree. There was some other stuff going on too, but let's plea bargain for that. Sort of like what Epstein got. But here, in contrast, David's rap sheet is formidable. Sexual harassment, arguably rape, also first degree murder of Uriah, theft, since a wife was property back then. Okay. Adultery, of course. And for good measure, he literally coveted his neighbor's wife. David broke about half the Ten Commandments in one fell swoop. So if ever anyone deserved to be canceled, King David deserved to be canceled. But despite all of that, David was forgiven. He had a miserable family life, but he was beloved by his people. His name actually means beloved. His reign continues, and his line is designated to rule forever. In the Bible, other covenants with God were conditional, quid pro quo in most cases, but not with David. With David, God's covenant was unconditional. It promised to establish his dynasty forever. There has arguably been no more beloved figure in the 3,500 years of Jewish history than King David. All King David needed to do to achieve that was to take responsibility for his actions. All he needed to do was to be accountable. All he needed to do was to symbolically turn around and face the victims, as he would be able to do from his palace looking out over Bathsheba's neighborhood. All he needed to do was turn around and face them and say, I'm sorry, and face Nathan the prophet as he did, not to equivocate, not to distract, not to spout about the Dow or the tariffs, not to delay and to deflect. The one thing the entire Trump team never does is the one thing, the only thing King David had to do. King David, arguably one of the most notorious sinners of all time, almost on a par with Donald Trump. But when the prophet Nathan spoke truth to power, David repented and displayed accountability for his actions. He owned what he had done. Psalm 151 is the psalm of accountability. We need to read it every day. It needs to be read in the White House every day. Let's begin the next prayer breakfast with Psalm 51. David suffered dearly, but in the end, he was saved. Pam Bondi, Donald Trump, and all the Epstein abettors, they will wear their stain forever. Thanks so much.